Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. Welcome to the show. This has been a much anticipated interaction on the channel. We're going to have our very first guest onto the show. And again, I say this has been a long time coming. And I think that we will get a lot of value out of this because the gentleman that I'm going to be interviewing, he works full-time in his traditional work. Also is in business for himself. Hopefully we'll be able to hear about lots of what's going on there. And he is currently single and is fairly my equal in being attractive. Not quite, but pretty doggone close. It's actually my great pleasure to have my brother, Mark Durham, on this interview. Brother, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, you know what it is. I say often to you and to other clients and prospective clients that my brother is my best client. He's our best client for sure. And I think you're going to have a really interesting story to be able to share with folks. It'll be really helpful, really insightful for folks who are vetting this idea, but also for clients because, again, you've been practicing this idea for years and years now, and I think you're a wealth of knowledge yourself in how you've put into practice infinite banking into your life and into your business. So take us back to the start, if you would. Let's start at how did you come across, and we're just going to have an organic conversation. There may be several bloopers that are dispersed in this conversation, but we're going to have a good time. We always do. But I want you to take us back to the beginning of how did you see infinite banking? What did it look like getting started? And then we'll start to walk that out, if you would.
Absolutely. I actually saw this at a very kind of a traditional setting. There was a quite a nice little group where you and I actually went down and saw a physical presentation of this concept. It was actually, from my remembrance, a little bit lengthy. But that was always good. Satiated a lot of my questions anyway, there at the very beginning, where everybody has a lot of questions, what if scenarios that plays through everybody's head. So I actually really enjoyed that because, I got to really soak in a lot of those details, had plenty of time to do so, and make some of those decisions that, needed to be made at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, really, because we jumped in the car together. I got you in my car with some other friends and business partners. What did you know getting into my car on our way down to see this presentation? Can you remember what you even knew at that point it was that you was getting ready to take a look at?
I knew that you told me to get in the car, and I was pretty secure that we weren't going to be burying any bodies because there's no shovels. So just jumped in the car.
All right, so not a lot. You're an open-minded guy, and I think from the time frame that we're talking about that was a time in both of our lives probably where we were getting pretty open-minded into increasing our income, getting into businesses, and lots of other things that just had us in a good mindset to be learning. And for sure, I know that I've decided to be a perpetual learner. And we've walked this journey together over these past several years. What we're talking about here is 2015. I believe later 2015 was when we got in the car, drove about an hour down the road to be able to see that presentation. So you say, and it's probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then there was question and answer. So when you saw this idea presented from the front of a room that you could become your own banker, that you could implement this concept of infinite banking, and it was going to mean something, how did you grasp infinite banking in the beginning? What did it mean to you, like on that day of seeing that presentation, and on that day when you did have, an opportunity to have a Q&A with a presenter, with a professional who is teaching and coaching and educating in that moment? What did it mean to you at that time?
At that time, I agree. We were very receptive for a lot of different things. For me, it really gave me just yet another layer of hope truth be told, just another opportunity, another door to be opened, that could lead to a hallway with more doors. Because I love numbers. I love playing around with numbers, especially simple algebra, or even simple math, even, but with different variables that you can enter into it, as far as like living expenses, calculating savings, all these different investments, all these different things, calculating how that compares with inflation and things like that. So pretty much anything that could help guard me against any of those variables for the long term was definitely down for learning about. So.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm with you on the fact that math is math, and
Yeah.
I know that I have clients and prospective clients who they get to a point, and that's fine, that say, well, show me the numbers, and they want printouts, and that's fine. I don't disparage that. I'm willing to walk with those that want to walk, run with those that want to run, sprint with those that want to sprint. I like to cultivate as close or as independent of a relationship with clients as possible, right? But we're not talking about anything beyond third grade math. I mean, somebody controls the banking function in Mark Durham's life. Somebody controls the banking function in Jesse Durham's life and in our businesses and whatnot. And it could be us, we're finding out on that day in 2015. And it seems like you're alluding to the fact that we are discussing the infinite banking concept when you start talking about, well, I see how this could relate to this hallway of doors of, well, this could be impacting how I run my household and how I pay bills, but it could also be how I approach investing and how I approach a business and all these different things. So I love that. Okay. So you see the live presentation, you get to have a Q&A, have some individual questions answered for yourself. What was the next step in your process of getting a policy and putting into practice what you'd first been exposed to back in 2015?
The very next step was a one-on-one conversation, figuring out what my more immediate needs were, what my medium needs were, and then what my long-term needs were. But of course, with the first policy, it was definitely focusing more on the more immediate needs, or semi-immediate needs rather, and goals, and just figuring out what those were, figuring out like what my total debt was, what did I want to impact first with my policy, more than with the first policy. We discussed some of those numbers. Also discussed how much, for instance, the main question on a lot of people's minds is, they come up with a number while they're looking at this information. They come up with a number that they're okay with starting out, setting aside to start up a policy. We discussed some of those numbers, and that was an interesting conversation in and of itself. More or less just getting me to recognize, the first rule, pay yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And how much that I was willing to pay myself first. That was an eye-opening experience, because, I had a number. I told it to the gentleman, and, he broke it down for me. He's like, okay, yeah, not a bad number. It's like per month, that's what this is. Per week, that's what this is. 40-hour work week, that's what that is. So each hour, you're willing to pay yourself X amount of cents. It's like, okay.
That's huge. That's huge. I know that question because I've adopted it as well. Because at the time when you and I were seeing this idea, we were both consumers. We were both customers. We were both beginning to participate as consumers on this journey of becoming our own bankers. And we went through this mental paradigm shift, is what Nash calls it in his book. It's the simplest idea. You can become your own banker. And there's an optimal product to be able to use. And then there's this process of independent privatized banking that you can implement, and you can become your own banker. But I do myself now with clients and potential clients as well, will use that same question that you referred to, as far as what, not should you pay yourself first, because when we get there and we say, well, of course, definitely, you just, the gas people get paid, the grocery people get paid, it's like everybody else is getting paid. I should pay myself. So when we arrive at we should pay ourselves, and you start figuring out, well, what should that number be? And I don't tell people their number. I seek to educate folks and ask good questions so that they arrive at their own conclusions. And when I was asked the first time, just like you were asked the first time, well, what are you worth per hour to yourself, from yourself? That I'd never considered that before. I mean, sure, I'd done my best to advance in my careers and advance in businesses to achieve higher levels and greater salaries and greater commissions and all these different things. But I'd never considered before how much I was worth to myself per hour. And like you said, it's like, I mean, you could really be talking about cents. I mean, you could be talking about cents. Now, numbers move left and right. What's big for some might be small for others and vice versa. But figuring out, well, okay, if I were to pay myself something, what would that look like per hour for 40 hours a week? If I were to just suppose this theoretical 40-hour a week, 50 weeks out of a year scenario, and it could be cents. Could be cents or just a few dollars per hour that we pay ourselves, but that would actually yield a big step towards becoming our own banker. So I know that was an impactful question for me. So I'm glad that you remember that one as well and share that one. Okay, so what was that like then as you're getting feedback from the professional who's saying, well, think big, think ambitious. And I think that's in line with what Nash says when he describes to even consider becoming your own banker, you have to use your imagination. I mean, sure, everybody's heard about and has opinions about, whether they're founded or not, about life insurance, and in particular about whole life insurance. And there's plenty said in the professional financial, entertainment world about whole life insurance. But Nash would say too that a lot of those opinions are based off of someone else's misunderstanding of life insurance. So when we can get past that, and we are looking at our numbers, here's my next question is, because Nash says we need to use our imagination, but it also needs to be reasonable and logical. So what was it like for you finding the middle ground between pursuing an ambitious number that would allow you, like you say, to be able to tackle things that are important to you right now, do something big enough that's going to allow you to be able to tackle that right now, begin immediately, but that's also a reasonable and a logical number for you. How did you land where you landed? What was that like? And how do you look back on that?
Absolutely. Well, the one thing that I think really helped me out, even in the beginning, is because honestly, I have you with me, brother, and that is one thing that you are very good at. And that is something that I've had to actually learn and incorporate into my own practices, both professionally and even for leisure as well, is, not getting bogged down in all the details, because sometimes, not too often, but sometimes I can be very number oriented, or very detail oriented. I mean, it's also part of my regular job is I have to know details. I have to be able to know all the different facets of certain things, but how of that is necessary or even applicable to divulge. And so that's something that you were always really good at. And even in the beginning, with helping me, is to expand my thinking, and my goals, but also keep some of that reasonableness as well, because I was already too focused on the reasonableness. And so you helped with the expansion. Like, well, why don't you just double that number? Why can't you? It's, just these little brotherly jabs, that we can have with each other. And honestly, I really pity anyone that doesn't have, either a running partner per se, or a type of mentor that they can look towards and get that feedback from each other and give it all at the same time. Whether you're just receiving it from that person and you're, or if you're able to give it back and forth like we do, I'm very appreciative of that. So yes, at the beginning, definitely was an expansion for what I necessarily wanted to do as a natural compulsion. But of course, knowing how things would go as the policy matured and as the process was being learned better by me, and I was going to be more efficient utilizing it, I did want to be more expansive with that first number. And so, yeah, it was a pretty reasonable number for me. And there were times at the beginning where, I made mistakes, of course, but it was expansive enough for my thinking at that time, but also reasonable enough that when I did make those mistakes, I was able to easily overcome those issues. And actually, a lot of those issues created even more expanse, so that I could just continue on my path. I was really, really happy about that. So,
I love it. I love it. Well, I would say that, I'm right there with you for sure, if not ahead of you. I feel like I've probably made every mistake that could be made in practicing this infinite banking concept. But, Nash said that more's caught than taught. There's just something about when you put your hands to the plow yourself. And, what I've heard someone like James Nethery say before is that when you don't know what's going on, the details don't matter. And he says, when you know what's going on, the details don't matter. It really is as simple as, that's so good, right? But it really is as simple as you can become your own banker. With third grade math, you could read a 92-page book that has large print and big illustrations. In a couple of hours, it's like $20-something. And you could just, it's a paradigm shift. That's the dichotomy there, is that it's a paradigm shift. It's like watching the Matrix movie, but in a book, if you understand that popular cultural reference for those that are listening. But it is as simple as you can become your own banker. So in a lot of ways, the details just don't matter. So I love it. So you found yourself being stretched, and that's good. I agree. We all benefit. Iron sharpens iron from having folks that can expand our thinking. And we can get a lot of that from reading Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. He says, we got to watch out for things like the arrival syndrome, thinking, I know it all, I've done it all. It's, all these preconceived ideas that we carry around with ourselves, instead of thinking, well, no, I'm going to be a perpetual student. And, I can always be learning more. And I certainly do feel that way. So expanding our thinking to think long range and never settling for having arrived and things like that will keep us growing and keep us open-minded, having ears to hear and eyes to see from those folks who can say, well, what about this? What about that? Have you considered this? It's good. And then I do believe that the more educated we are, the better decisions that we can make. So you arrive at a number for yourself and you get your first policy enforced. Tell me about that. Tell me, what was it like, getting a medical examination and giving, putting your banking information on the paperwork and writing the check for the first premiums, and what was that like?
Yeah, it was so hard. I think I had to pick up the phone. I think I had to make a phone call, and then there was an email. I had to send an email response back. That was troublesome times as an adult, I gotta say.
All right, for our audio listeners, sarcasm is a language in our family, and we do speak it with regularity and fluently. Right. I understand what you're saying, and I can appreciate the sarcasm. And I want to make sure that everybody else has a chance to be able to appreciate it as well. You're a funny guy, and I know what you're saying there. What was it like then? When the policy is enforced and you've written your check, do you mind saying, what did you use policy loan? I mean, you did actually start using policy loans pretty quick, and what'd you put those towards?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I'll definitely be candid and clear about this, because I know how some people can be today's world, text me instead of calling me, or anything
Right.
like that. Even some of my personal customers will do that. But no, it was actually very easy. Lots of different avenues that I could have used for all these different things. And as far as utilizing the policy, I did my first withdrawal, I believe, in 6-month increments. I was working with, a more finite policy. It was a young policy. So I definitely wanted to accrue a little bit on it before making that policy loan. And I was using mine towards debt. I come from the typical background, but for your viewers, just, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and I was so good at not getting good grades that I had to get a job before I could even finish college. So, but So I started that immediately on student loans and credit cards, and just trying to get those that big elephant one bite at a time. It's little bitty tidbits there at the beginning, but it was that first one that was pretty good feeling. Pretty good feeling.
Oh, I imagine it was. And so you had those two things on your radar immediately when you were even deciding to get a policy. You knew that you had student loan debt that you were going to be tackling one way or another.
Oh
You had credit cards
yeah,
that you're going to be tackling one way or another. And that's the case for everybody. The items might be different, but then again, they're really not probably. But we can only finance things one of a couple of ways. Either we are using someone else's money on their terms and conditions, we're paying them interest, building their business, okay? And the other scenario is we abdicate the opportunity to earn on our money if we want to pay cash for the things that we do. So we have to build up, accrue, and amass, and we can't touch it. And we lose the opportunity of what our money is worth and what it can do. And then we have to liquidate it all to finance the thing. And the third option is this, is you can have that and asset. You can have that asset wherein you acquire and build and amass your capital that grows day over day, weekends, holidays, in perpetuity until the maturation of the policy. But you can also access the capital in that policy without interrupting that compounding growth. So you said you decided, hey, I'm going to let this build up for the first 6 months, and then I'll make my first policy loan. And you make like it was really simple, and you can confirm that again. And you decided to tackle credit cards and student loan debt. Now, again, for the benefit of the others, who was it that decided that credit cards and student loans would be the things that you would use your policy loans towards? Who made that choice?
me for sure.
Right. And then what about the time frame? Who said 6 months?
I discussed that with my map specialist.
Okay. And when you say map specialist, that would be those Excel ninjas, those
Yeah.
black and white paper magicians, right? So they can put in black and white what your trajectories look like based off your cash values and your debts, if you're in particularly working on a debt snowball to pay things off. So I'd also like to know, what was that like sitting on that for, and I say sitting on that, again, you chose to wait 6 months of just paying premiums month after month for the first 6 months. But, did you think about that much? Were you anxious
Yeah.
about that at all? Or was it just, out of sight, out of mind, and you're making these premium payments? Or, I mean, how was that for you?
All of the above. It's been a few years, and whenever you're thinking about something in the past, you're always going to glaze it over a little bit. Put that icing on the donut, so to speak. But if I were to focus on it, yes, I definitely had a lot of reservations. Um, are you even breathing if you don't? So about jumping into anything that's new,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the good news for me is that I know the numbers. I knew the numbers. I saw the numbers. I played with the numbers, and I liked the numbers because I had gotten really good at that stage of my life. I'd gotten really good about monthly expenditures. I definitely had a high volume of debt, and I know not everybody's going to come from that level, but I also know a lot of people do. A lot of college friends of mine, we've had those discussions. We've had some of those hard discussions, and I know a lot of people don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. But I feel that there is a growing number of people that do want to talk about financial literacy and learn different avenues and different methodologies. And that was really good for me because that really did help me to think of it as not quite an investment, but definitely, when you're paying yourself first, just the golden rule. And I really did focus on that to help offset some of those negative feelings or emotions that were attached with that beginning phase.
Okay, yeah. Now, discipline is required to be successful in anything. And being able to delay gratification for those first 6 months is, like, of course, you're going to feel a certain level of hesitation or curiosity. It's like, what's it going to be like when I send off for my first policy loan? But they sent the money. when you requested it to be sent to, and you get the money and you start paying these student loans off, and you start paying these. And I know what that's like. We've been able to pay off our student loans. We have none today. Have it for a little while now. It's a what was that like, being able to send 6 months worth of payments that you had built up in an entity that you privately owned and controlled, to start just getting those out of your life?
It was pretty revealing. It was definitely a very positive emotion, because, like I said, I kind of delved into it a little bit. But at that time, my finances were very finite. Uh, as we've grown from that, I've definitely become even more open for different ventures, different investments, and different money making activities. But at that time, things were very finite. So, like that first policy, it was a finite resource, but I did know that, the way that was growing, and utilizing the 6 month turnaround time for the policy loans, that was going to be not a small chunk to me. That was quite a significant difference to me, because I'd gotten so used and so lured by those monthly expenditures that I got very good at making sure I was on time with my payments to them. But as soon as that hourglass started to tilt the other direction, where I started to get more focused on making sure to pay myself with that same type of integrity, and then, that light bulb switch, that one of those small aha moments of, why haven't I been doing this longer? So yeah,
I love it.
it was definitely a good feeling.
Right, no doubt, no doubt. I know that, and I'm happy for you, and I'm proud of you. And I probably haven't even said enough about how, even outside of being my best client, being the best client that we have for sure. You're a go-getter. I've seen you year after year. You've been several years in the same position. I mean, I'll let you say what you want about what you do, and but you've been successful year after year. You've grown and you've developed, and you've become more profitable year after year in your traditional business. And then now, of course, you're getting into business of your own for a little while now, and that's really exciting. So I think that'll be a good segue into my next question being, you have the first policy, you're using the first policy. When did it become apparent to you that you would begin to add to your system? What did that look like? What did that feel like? Describe that to us, and how that came about, because now, I mean, we saw the idea together back in 2015 as consumers, the both of us. I'm still not a professional in the industry at this time. So you as a consumer, what did that look like, going from one policy to thinking, maybe I need another one, and what for and why?
Absolutely. You definitely beat me on that gun, and thank you for the compliments, brother. It's very kind. Um, I waited a lot longer to open up my second policy. I even knew some of the numbers at that time for the percentage of people that would open up their second policy, how long on average it would take them to do so. But for me, like I said, even in those beginning stages of, opening up my mind a little bit better, to new things, I had a lot of background to catch up on. So I definitely did wait a little bit too long, longer than most, I would say, before opening up my second policy. I believe it was right about 3.5, 4 years even before I opened up the second policy. But at that time, I had actually changed up my first policy. I was actually making quarterly withdrawals at that time, for more than what I was, it was more mature, it's becoming more efficient. So obviously I needed to reevaluate how I was utilizing that policy to make payments against my debts. The second policy opened up because situations with my personal income were changing for the better. I was getting better at my position. I was going up, the ladder of the business that I work at and now run. And so with those changes, I was trying to be that good steward of, to whom much is given,
Much is required. Yeah.
Much is required. Yeah. So just trying to reevaluate those income versus expenditures. Because obviously I still had that mountain of debt, but also I realized at that time that, income is vastly important to me, increasing income, because as long as you can maintain that debt umbrella Well, of course, if you can increase your income without changing your lifestyle needs too much, then obviously that's going to create some excess in income, which you could use to utilize in investments and the debt, of course. But just utilizing those funds for more assets to make the income go up even higher and just snowball the entire thing.
Right. I think it naturally becomes apparent to most folks in just a handful of ways when it's appropriate to get another policy or start adding to their system, and it's income goes up. That
Yep.
perfectly makes sense. Income goes up. Maybe some big expenses go down. That could also be a case. Maybe you start seeing more about the infinite part of the infinite banking concept, and you say, well, okay, if I'm using this for paying off debt, could I use this for, just like Nash shows in his book, what about buying business equipment? What about my charitable giving? What about college for the kids? What about just the infinite part, right? So things started becoming apparent for you. And it doesn't, what I would say is, I certainly wouldn't want anybody that is a client or a prospective client for us to feel like there is any push, because there's not, to get another policy. But there are various reasons of why one would arrive at the decision to add to their system. For myself and my wife, we've practiced for 6 years now, and we have acquired several policies. I have a policy on me. My wife has a policy on her. We have 3 children. There's one on each of them, and we have others. So we've systematically and strategically built on our own system of policies, and Nash says that as well. He says what he's talking about is eventually going to be a system of policies that will eventually equal, or the premiums will eventually equal what our income is. Now, again, we're talking about over the course of your lifetime. So, again, I'm emphasizing no rush. It should be naturally apparent. And normally the case is that, like with my wife and I, we paid significant premiums for our very first policy. Very significant premiums for someone who came from the background of being a teacher in the state of North Carolina. And yet, it was less than a year that we were between ourselves saying, we should be doing more. We can do more. We could be adding to our system, both for getting coverage on her. We were growing as a family, so for sure it makes sense to have the important people in your life have coverage. Be protected. But more importantly, for the need for finance. So you find yourself in that position of greater incomes coming in. So that made you evaluate again. Well, okay, how much percentage wise, let's say, and that's just one way to look at it, but what percentage of my income do I have going and building my privatized banking system? And that's just one metric. I'm not saying it's the only one that you should consider, but it is a gauge if you're ultimately considering, well, how do I get premium dollars to equal my income? Am I making strategic steps in that direction as long as I'm playing honest banker and adding to my system? So when you added to your system, and which you have, what did you use your system of policies for at that point in your life and business? And tell us some more, if you would, about what you've done and what you've been doing.
Absolutely. I decided, like many people may come to the same conclusion, I wanted to keep things nice and concise. And so the first policy I opened up, that was strictly for debt purposes, debt reduction purposes, to recapture that money. The second policy that I opened up was for business ventures, because I also saw the need for increasing income opportunities. And just, whenever you have the resources available to you, the opportunities sometimes, not always, but sometimes they'll just show up. And so you have to be ready to take those opportunities. I mean, how many times have we often seen things, in life, whether it be investing in ETFs or the stock market or anything like that, just Bitcoin, all these things that just show up and people are like, oh, well, I had that 10 years ago. And now it's $60,000 a share, whatever. But there's always that excuse in the hindsight 2020, but I definitely wanted to be a little bit more prepared. So the second policy, I had that nice, friendly, brotherly, jab to the side. Okay, well, what do you see that like, Mark? And you and I had some of those discussions, about the utility of it, how much that I would need to be able to pull from that policy, even at the beginning, and just to see what that would kind of look like. So the second policy, geared it much towards the business aspect of creating more income.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Well, there's no situation where we would want to be undercapitalized. There's no time when, now or in the future or in the past, when we would say, I wish I had less money or less access to it. That's not the case. So again, it really should be an imaginative stretch, an ambitious move every time that we add to what we're doing. But again, grounded, tempered with logic and reason. So as long as it's in between, raising our eyebrows and, taking a step back and having a little wow factor going on, but also with planning and strategy, see, okay, yeah, that actually is a reasonable thing for me to consider. And you dial it in, but somewhere between there. But ultimately, if we're keeping in mind that opportunity will present itself to those who have capital, and you've experienced that, and I mean the phone calls that we've enjoyed together over the past couple of years as you've been building a business, and I've been impressed, and it's encouraging to me, both because you are my brother, but also because you are a client, and I've got to see, and you've told me how you've been using your policies for this and that and the other, and I see you, not only doing better for yourself, but you and I, the discussions that we've had about, our family, and when I say our family, I mean, it's like we have intergenerational discussions, and, but even in your workplace, I mean, when you tell me about the folks that you work with and how your thinking is affecting even their earning ability, and I love that. That's absolutely fantastic. So your income was growing up, you're adding to your system, you got a second policy, you've had other policies as well. Since then, give us the up to date news. Where are you at in your learning about infinite banking? Where are you at in how you're using your policies today, or real recent?
Real recent. There's definitely been a lot of really good things going on. It's definitely been a blessed season for me, both professionally and on the side as well. I mean, our families are all booming. Especially so excited about all of the kids that all of my siblings have. Getting to spend time with that family is really important.
Again, this is where I interject. Yes, ladies, he is single.
So, so like the business policy that I opened that up about a year and a half ago, I believe now. That policy, I actually utilized it for a few different business moves, just trying to start up some things on my own. And obviously, whenever you're doing that sort of thing, like you say, you cannot have enough capital. And the mistake that I see a lot of people do is they just go straight into debt. If they want to open up their own business, they just go to the bank, they take a massive loan, or they find a private debtor that will just loan them out this unreasonable amount to get started. And while it can work, it's just a different way for me now to plan ahead, to have it accessible to me, because you could either be the best boss or the best boss, right? You could either not pay yourself back, steal the peas, as I've often heard you say on your podcast. And, obviously Nash focused on that a big time, but thankfully I did not. And so for the business policy, I took out a loan because I realized very quickly one day with some of the things that I was doing, moving things around here and there, moving furniture or whatever items, transport, I needed a vehicle because it turns out a sedan won't fit a 6-drawer dresser. So I decided to look at some things, and I was presented with an opportunity to look at a box truck, and nice little 16-foot Mitsubishi box truck. And I was like, all right, cool. Looked it over. It's like, how much do you want for it? We went over those financials, and I was like, I think I can do that. So I made a quick phone call, got some numbers from the policy holders, and I was like, how much can I take? And they said, you can take this much. And I was like, cool, let's get that started.
I love it.
Yeah. So didn't have to worry about going to the bank saying, hey, please, I want some more.
Right. Absolutely.
and instead of going to the local state employees credit union or anything like that, for 4%, 3%, I wouldn't even care if it's a 0%, APR. Instead, now I've got my own policy under my terms and conditions. I can pay it. I decided to pay it back pretty rapidly, a little bit aggressive. But like I said, you can either be the world's best boss or you can be your best boss, depending on how you want to take that perspective. So I pretty much doubled that APR because it's going back into my bank. Yes, please and thank you.
Right.
So definitely excited about that. And here we are. I mean, that was only just several months ago now that I purchased that truck, and it's already more than 2/3 paid for itself just because of the extra income that has allowed me to produce. And of course, I'm set on that monthly repayment plan to my own policy. I've set that aside every month, and that's only paid off, 5 months of the years that I set myself for to pay that back off. But already the extra income that's allowed and boosted for me has more than, it's getting close to getting paid off. So excited about that.
Right. And there's so much there in what you said. So for the listeners, when you're saying the business policy, the debt policy, these are just in your mind or on your paper or, however you document, however you want to do your banking. It's you becoming your own banker. You're saying, well, I have decided to use this policy for paying off debts. I've decided to use this policy for my business equipment acquisitions. And you could do that and swap that. It's like, that's all you. That's not the insurance company saying do this or do that. It's not me saying do this or do that. It's you deciding how you're going to use your capital, when you're going to use your capital, what you're going to use your capital for. And you have an opportunity come up here where it's like, well, I have proactively built up X amount of capital in the system of policies that I own and control. Yes, I do want to buy that piece of equipment, and you do, and it just makes you more productive in your business because again, you're not bleeding out interest dollars that you conventionally would have done otherwise. And could you be earning income while paying interest? Well, sure, but the only thing better than getting a truck is getting a box truck and getting the money back.
Yes.
I love that.
Yep.
I love that.
Absolutely.
So, and the extra that you were talking about, and I'll let you get back, because you talked about paying yourself interest, and you were being aggressive about how quickly you were paying yourself back. And again, that's completely on you. It's not the insurance company. It's not me. It's not anybody else saying, when are you paying it back? How are you paying it back? It's like, they just send you the money. And they just send you the money. And it was you deciding, well, I'll do it this fast and I'll pay it at this rate. And you're being an honest banker, and you're even being generous on that side of things, giving yourself a significant interest, which again, like Nash says in the book, that's just more capital to add to your system, which just grows and expands it, So I love everything about that. Yeah, getting a phone call from my younger brother saying, yeah, bought a box truck for my business. It's so awesome. And that's really encouraging to me. And I know that will be to lots of other people. And let me point out too, that was in your wheelhouse. You buying a box truck was just a natural move based off of your knowledge, your experience, your network, what you knew and what you had, built up in capital to make that doable and feasible and practical and profitable for you. It made sense. So when I'm saying that because when I have conversations with folks who maybe they're in a great financial situation and they're saying, well, what am I going to do with a policy loan? What would I use my money for? I like to point them to what it is that they're already doing. Because no matter what, you're running a household or you're running a business, you're already doing banking with somebody. My suggestion is that we do it with ourselves, for ourselves. And it just made sense for you to be able to do what you described, and you positioned yourself to be able to do it. And it's just a beautiful thing. It was in your wheelhouse. You were the one that was calling the shots. And that is the ultimate. That's it. That's the idea, is becoming your own banker. I love it. I absolutely love it. Brother, I don't know that I got any more questions. I think that if folks will listen to your experience, they'll really be encouraged by it. I know that, and you know that, more is caught than taught. There's a lot here that you've shared with us, and I know there's going to be a lot of value in that for folks that are either researching and vetting this idea to become their own banker themselves. You know, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Brother, I just can't thank you enough. Because yes, more is caught than taught, and even after practicing some of these things for quite some time now, there's still nothing quite like having a good mentor. I've mentioned that already. You know, to any of your listeners out there, I would strongly encourage them to get some sort of mentor, whether it's above or down here on earth, be what it may. But also, even after starting to digest it, this is infinite banking. There are endless possibilities, infinite number of ways that they could utilize it, but also just digesting different materials. I just want to thank you for having this podcast, because I'll definitely catch myself all the time where I'll pop one in and be like, I needed to hear that again today, because just different, even some of the basic fundamental aspects, you know, some of these methodologies have been just so ingrained in us that to incorporate different methods or ways of thinking about certain things and certain functions of how money works and how our own personal banking works. I think it's very important to keep listening, to keep circulating certain things around us, just to make sure that we're going to be doing the same, be doing the correct steps, and to continue doing those daily tasks.
Right. Right. Well, Scripture tells us that if you're keeping company with fools, you're going to be foolish. And I do have a pretty high opinion of folks who decide to spend time reading and listening to a subject like this, the idea of becoming your own banker. I mean, those are the kinds of the people, you know, the independent, free-thinking folks that are looking for autonomy in their personal finance. You know, I just want to be the biggest promoter of, you know, you, my brother, becoming your own banker, me becoming my own banker, those that are listening, you know, becoming your own banker. And I'm certainly on board with, you know, we all benefit from having positive sharpening. You know, I told somebody earlier today, it's like, man, when we get on the phone, I feel sharpened. I don't feel dull. I don't feel like I pass the time, you know, inadequately or fruitlessly. It's a good conversation. I feel that with you, and I think that others that are listening in and tuning in will feel the exact same. So you have my respect, brother. You know, I love our private calls where I get to hear about what you're doing, and it's a lot of fun. This has been a long time coming. I've really looked forward to being able to have you speak on our call. It's, you know, I felt like getting out a whole lot of how-tos and the nuts and bolts, you know, because I wanted people, as soon as they started being exposed to this idea, to be able to hit the ground running, at least with their education, you know, and if they got ears to hear and eyes to see, the right ones will reach out for a webinar or a phone call. But, you know, I just want to be able to put my best practices out there, that way that folks can hear. And again, I know that those that are listening to you, they're getting to hear a new perspective on that, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you being willing, you know, to get on here and share that with others for their benefit. And man, I look forward to our next phone call, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back on here again in the future. So keep crushing it. I appreciate you. I love you.
Love you too.
Awesome. My name is Jesse Durham. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you'd like to continue this conversation, I'd love to be able to hear from you. You can reach me at 828-817-4223, or you can email durhamtalents@gmail.com. This has been an absolute pleasure for me. I look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day. Take care.
I took the opportunity to clean my camera lens. Is it any better?
Lighting, I think, is good. You look good. Glad to see you wearing appropriate attire this time.
Can you feel?
That was smooth. That was a lot of fun. That's what she said.
Always.
The only
I'm here, aren't I? They're excited, you know.
Right. Oh my goodness. All right.
Professional advertisement.
I love you.
I love you.
Por supuesto.
Look forward to the next one.